I titled this Warning 9/11 because 9/11 has been on my head all week long. And I'm thinking, why do I keep seeing 9/11? Why do I keep seeing 9/11? I asked God about it, and he started kind of speaking to me, elaborating on what's going on. And I put the 70th week because that's a time frame that is coming very, very soon. You want to go ahead and move to the next slide? Daniel is one of the books of the Old Testament where this gentleman is given many visions of the last days. Daniel is one of the foremost authorities in the Old Testament about Bible prophecy and what's going to happen in these last days. He's been given visions by God. He writes it down, the visions. He's talked to King Nebuchadnezzar about the visions, things of that nature. He had more than a few. So at this point in time in Daniel chapter 9, I use verse 11 because I feel that's what God was giving me. That verse states in the Amplified, yes, all Israel has transgressed your law, even turning aside, not obeying your voice. So the curse has been poured out on us and the oath which is written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, because we have sinned against him. Can you move to the next slide? What he's doing in Daniel chapter 9, this is Daniel talking to God. The first 20 verses is him praying. He's in prayer for mercy for his people because he just told you what was going on. They done fall away. They're not listening to him. Daniel's people have been tripping. Verse 5, it talks about how they sinned, how they committed wrong, how they're behaving wickedly. Verse 6 talks about how they haven't listened, they haven't heeded his word. They're treacherous, unfaithful, and rebellious. So if you skip ahead to verse 22, the angel Gabriel comes to meet with them because Daniel's been praying and praying and praying in fervent prayer, right? He's in fervent prayer. And so the angel Gabriel comes to see about him, comes to see him. You know, Daniel had major favor with God because of his love, his devotion to God. So God looked out for him and he sent Angel Gabriel to come speak to him. Can you move to the next one, please? Daniel 9:24. He said, the angel Gabriel basically told him, okay, you've been praying, and I've got an answer for you. And here's the answer. 70 weeks of years, or 490 years, have been decreed for your people and for your holy city, Jerusalem, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make atonement, reconciliation for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, right standing with God, and to seal a vision and prophecy and prophet, and to anoint the most holy place. So right there, he's saying basically you have 70 weeks. 70 weeks from a certain time period is going to be the end of this current world stage as we know it, because he's bringing it into sin, making an atonement and reconciliation for all the wickedness that has transpired, right? Can you move to the next slide, please? Now, put this way so it's easier to understand, because understanding the 70 weeks and the 490 years can be a monumental task. So I try to break it down as easy as possible. At that moment in time, he decreed 70 weeks. Now, of those 70 weeks that were decreed for his people of Jerusalem, 69 of those weeks have already happened. The last one is on the way. He said it'll be 7 weeks and it'll be 62 weeks, which equals 69 weeks. So the end of the 69 weeks was completed with the death and resurrection of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. From that time when they were trying to rebuild the temple back in Daniel's day, going all the way up to Jesus Christ walking the earth, his death and resurrection, that completed the 69 weeks. And he also said in that chapter, at that moment in time, once the 69 weeks were completed, there will be a suspension of time frame. And then he would come back to his people for that final week. That suspension of time frame is what we know as the church age, the time of the Gentiles, where the Gentiles will trample the land underfoot. It's the time where the gospel goes out to everybody because the Jews crucified Jesus Christ. So he made it available. He made the gift of salvation available to everyone. But he also said there's a time frame around that, and it will not be like that forever. So we are living in the church age, or the last days of the church age, the Gentile age. The church age ends and the 70th week, or that final week, begins. That final week starts with a covenant, a binding and irrevocable covenant that is spoken of in verse 27. You skip to the next one, please. Verse 27 talks about this covenant that's going to be made, right? Daniel 9:27 in the Amplified version. And he will enter into a binding and irrevocable covenant with the many for 1 week, 7 years. But in the middle of the week, he will stop the sacrifice and grain offering. And just to backtrack real quick, when they talk about 1 week, they mean 7 years. Each week is a 7-year period. That's what it says, 7 weeks, 7, 490 years. So, but in the middle of the week, he will stop the sacrifice. That's 3.5 years in, and the grain offering for the remaining 3.5 years. And on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until the complete destruction. One that is decreed is poured out on the one who causes the horror. So when he's saying he's going to make a covenant with them for 7 years, but in the middle of that 7 years, he's going to break the covenant. He's going to stop the sacrifice and the grain offering. So some people are wondering, wait a minute, what sacrifice, what grain offering? I thought Jesus Christ was a sacrifice, and he was. But in the Old Testament, in the Temple of Solomon, they sacrificed animals to atone for their sins, right? And there had to be certain types of animals. We've talked in the past, we talked recently about how they are getting ready to rebuild this temple, and they're at a breakneck pace for it. And there's a lot more information on that as come out recently, but I'm saving that for another message because we'll be here all day talking about it if I don't. But they're going to rebuild this temple. They're in the process of doing this. And when they rebuild the temple, they will restart temple sacrifice. The Sanhedrin and High Jewish Council is already getting things prepared for this. They've been preparing for this for several years now, a few decades now. They've been trying to get things really ready for this temple sacrifice, which they plan on reinstituting this year, 2024. Yes, indeed, it's going down. So that being said, that's one thing. They'll do the temple sacrifice, they'll do it as a ritual. Then when this leader comes in, he makes his covenant, then they're doing the sacrifices for real, right? But he puts a stop to it in the middle. And he said, on the wings of abominations will come one who makes desolate. They're talking about the enemy. They're talking about Satan. They're talking about the Antichrist. Even until the complete destruction. That is very clear. It's like, I'm not leaving the remnant. I'm destroying everything that you see in this world. This world system has to go. It was decreed, and his destruction, his judgment is going to be poured out on the one who causes the horror, which is Satan, the beast. But it's also going to be poured out on those who do not put their faith and trust in Jesus Christ. Those that side with the beast. Because if you don't trust Jesus, if you don't put your faith and trust in Jesus, if you do not choose for Jesus, then you're choosing for the enemy, and that's the reality of it. You put it how you want to, that's the truth of the matter. If you're not choosing for Jesus, you're choosing to serve the enemy. Can we move to the next slide, please? The tribulation will last 7 prophetic Hebrew years, or in our case, 7 years based on the Gregorian calendar. 360 days a year is the Hebrew calendar. 365 days is our calendar, so give or take a few days a year. But yes, the tribulation will last for a 7-year period. Now, the word is very clear on this time frame of when this will happen, right? It's very clear on a couple things. You will know when the time is near based on the signs of the time, based on the seasons. Just like you see the seasons change, you see the leaves turning colors, you know the season's about to change. So when you see all these things that have been put in his word that show, that are signs of his coming, we see all these things happening, taken together, you know his coming is near. I'll be 50 in June. I have been studying this. I have been interested in this since I was a young kid. So you're talking over 40 plus years. And when I was in my early 20s, I was always, oh my God, it's coming. It can happen at any time, because I was seeing different signs. But at that point in time, I still did not understand all the signs. Then I started to understand it. I said, oh, we have some time. We have quite a bit of time, because these certain signs have to happen, right? As time went on, I started to see these things happening. And you get to the point now where just a few years ago, it was 2021. And I was having a conversation with Pastor. And I said, I'm not sure if we're there just yet. I think we're getting kind of close, but I don't think we're there yet. And within a few weeks of really doing some studying and research, I had to backtrack and say, you know what? Because the Spirit had to convict me. Spirit said, no, we there. And so I had to come back to her and say, you know what? I believe you're right. I believe we are right there. And so I look at the signs, what's going on. I say, yeah, that time frame is near. There's certain things that has to happen in order for the 70th week to begin. First off, the church age has to end. So with that being said, for those that believe in the rapture, you have a lot of people say, there's no such thing as a rapture, or Jesus Christ is not coming back, or when he comes back, it's going to be for the return. Make no mistake, the word is very clear. It said in Daniel, you just read, it said that the 70th week begins when the church age ends. It talks about in the book of Revelations, how he wrote the book of Revelations, St. John the Divine wrote these 7 letters to the 7 churches in Asia Minor back in the day, which are also 7 letters to the state of the world church at that point in time in history, right? After these 7 letters are done, after so many things happen, you don't hear about the church anymore, because they go into the rapture, they go into the tribulation period, the 7 years. He says in his word very clearly that he will keep us from the hour of trial. That does not mean we're not going to go through things leading up to it. Does not mean we're not going to be here for everything going on up to through the birth pains and up to the beginning of tribulation. Because if Jesus Christ has to suffer when he was here, what makes us think we're not going to suffer? So, but it is what it is. He also said he would cover us. He also said in these last days, you're going to see outpouring like never before. So I'm going to get to that in just a moment. Can we go ahead and move to the next slide, please? So I put this graph here just kind of give you an illustration that kind of breaks it down, makes it a little easier. The 70th week, not this all weeks. This is the 70th week, the final week. You'll see at the top it says the final 7 prophesied years, and you'll see a line right in the middle: intensity of troubles. The first half you see 3.5 years, and you see another 3.5 years. The first half though you see confirmation of the Daniel 9:27 covenant, right? And then your 3.5 years. Now during this time frame, because mind you, leading up to this, the Revelation says it's going to be all out war. It's going to be panic, chaos, and hysteria. We'll get to that in just a moment. It tells you what the world's going to be like. And then somebody's going to have to come in and bring this false peace and kind of calm people down and get people to chill. And if you notice, if you look at the world today, there's no chill. No chill in the world today. People are angry. People are upset. People want to do what they want to do on a whole nother level. The respect for the people has grown cold. The love of the people has grown cold. You just don't see people living as they used to, with love and walking in God the way they used to. Can we move to the next slide? No, before you move to the next slide, in the second half of that, you see abomination of desolations, pre-wrath rapture. We're gonna leave that alone, pre-wrath rapture. That's something different. But the abomination of desolation right there points to that middle line going down the middle. That's because at that point in time, that's when the Antichrist is supposed to change the game. And he goes after Israel. Because in the beginning, he makes a peace covenant with them and the whole world. But halfway through it, he flips his lid because he wants control of everything. And so he's coming for it. And that's when you see the final battle of Armageddon really start to get ramped up. He will sit in the temple and he will say that he is God. And that's why they say the abomination of desolation. Satan is the abomination of desolation. And he's going to get in there. He's going to blaspheme in the temple. At the very end of this 7-year period, you have the return of Jesus to earth. That is different from the rapture. The rapture is when he comes in the clouds for those that put their faith and trust in him. At the end of the 7 years is when he returns to earth with his armies, with the saints, with those of us that are faithful to him for the final battle, where basically he walks in, slaps Satan, takes him out, puts him down the hill or chains him up, and it's all good. And then we move into a 1,000-year millennial reign of peace. But before we get to that time point, we have these 7 years of tribulation that's about to come on us, the 70th week. Can we go ahead and move to the next slide, please? Luke chapter 21. This is the Olivet prophecy. This is part of the Olivet prophecy when the apostles were talking to Jesus and they said, what will be the signs of the coming? What's going to happen in the end of times? How do we know? And he says in chapter 25, I put this part off for a reason. Luke chapter 21, verse 25, there will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars. On the earth, nations will be in anguish and perplexity at the roaring and tossing of the sea. People will faint from terror, apprehensive of what is coming on the world, for the heavenly bodies will be shaken. At that time, they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. When these things begin to take place, stand up and lift your heads up, because your redemption is drawing near. Now, after that, it goes on to talk about more stuff that's happening to the world, and then it talks about the second coming. But right there, he says in verse 28, when these things begin to take place, stand up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. So when you see all these things taking place, you got to know he's coming back soon. And so if you see these things happening, if you see the picture on the wall, the writings on the wall, everything is telling you he is coming soon. You have to sit back and ask yourself, how's my relationship with Christ? Do I love him? Are we good? Am I doing what he's supposed to be doing? Am I in position? Because you can accept Christ all day, but if you're not listening to him, if you're not moving as he guides you, you can fall for the okie doke. If you're not listening, he calls us for a reason. He wants us to focus on him for a reason. He wants us to come out of the world and stay focused on him for a reason. Because there's a lot of distraction in the world. There's a lot of Satan trying to get people to not believe in him. There's a lot of false prophets. There's a lot of just false demonic activity going on a whole nother level that is designed to get people to focus on anything but him. Which is why at Christmas time, people talk about Santa Claus rather than Jesus. At Easter, we talk about the Easter Bunny rather than talking about Jesus, the death and resurrection. These are distractions, and there's so many more coming. Can we move to the next slide, please? So they said there'll be signs in the suns, moons, and stars. They said people will be feigning for fear and things of that nature, right? So these are some of the I put this here because I want you to see some of the things that are actually happening in real time to show you how close we are. In 1 week, the last week of 2023, at least 15 more billionaires have been identified as building new doomsday bunkers. Billionaires. Now I say 15 more because they've already had hundreds. 15 more on top of the hundreds we already know about. Now that's the billionaires. Now over 575 bunkers, regular, not luxury bunkers like the billionaires. These are regular bunkers. These are regular bunkers. Over 575 have been fitted to house up to 10,000 people in the Black Hills Mountains. Residents in South Dakota have built basically an underground city for a doomsday scenario. And this is legit. This is not smoke and mirrors. This is something you can document. You can go and Google it. You can find this stuff. Robert Vicino, a Cali businessman, he's selling bunkers starting at $55,000. $55,000 for the bunker, and then like another $20,000, $30,000 for your supplies for a year. Election or no? I say election or no because it's 2024. The election is coming up in less than 10 months, but we're not even sure who the nominee is. You got Biden on one end, you got Trump on another end, you got people talking, but they're trying to put Trump in jail. Biden, his age is up there, so you never really know. So we don't even know who's going to be our next world leader. We don't know what's going to happen. I'm not even sure that the actual nominee for president is actually a nominee right now, but that's neither here nor there. I'm just saying there's a lot of uncertainty in the political market right now, in the political arena. The markets will tank. When you look at the stock market today, you think, man, well, it's doing awesome. They're at the highest levels they've ever been. The Dow's close to this highest level. The NASDAQ, the S&P 500, they're making money. They're doing great. People aren't paying attention that the market is continuously being propped up. The market, technically, and just being real, just like the body, when the body is sick, it heals itself. The market needs correction in order for it to be healthy. But instead of letting the market correct itself, they keep pumping more money into the market. So what happens is, as they pump more money into this market, money that is non-existent because we don't have the gold to back this new money, you're basically inflating what the market looks like, and you're putting it in a position that when the market does correct, the crash will be the biggest crash we've ever seen. But there's a reason why they're propping it up. They have to prop the dollar up because you have enemies overseas that want to tank the dollar because they know that it will affect us. You have the BRICS countries trying to move on the BRICS, trying to get the yen up and trying to get their weight up so that they can come after the United States and come after that dollar. So we continuously pumping money into it. We also don't want to see gas prices go any higher than they already are because we know that once we go into Iran, they're going to skyrocket. So now you have to pump money into the market to keep that level. But you can only do so much before the balloon eventually explodes. So every pundit out there, every market analyst that really knows what's going on, they've all been saying the same thing. It should have come a long time ago, but they didn't. So when it does hit, whether it's the beginning of this year, later on this year, or next year, when that market tanks, it's going to be a catastrophic crash. The government is preparing for an ELE, an extinction level event. They're preparing for the possibility. They've given their senators these new satellite phones. Just this past summer, they gave a bunch of senators these new special satellite phones, right? But they've all already had satellite phones, so why are we giving them these new cell phones? It's a reason for it, but they're not talking about it. The feds have loaned over 140,000, over 140 billion. The feds have loaned over $140 billion since March of 2023. Now, just to put things in perspective, when they had the collapse in 2008 of the banking market, we didn't even loan $100 billion. We've loaned $140 billion just since March of last year. Wars, cyber wars, etc., etc. If you've been paying attention, they've been talking about the cyber attacks for a long time now. There have been cyber attacks going on. They've been propping it up as being a big issue, saying that at any point in time, there could be a major cyber attack on our land that could affect our future. To put things in perspective for folks that don't know, our grid is old. Our infrastructure is very old. The electrical grid is not healthy. If one part of the grid goes down, that's one thing. They can repair that. If two parts of the grid goes down, it may take a little while, but they can get that under wraps. If half the grid of the country goes down, that puts us in a trick bag and a quandary position. If the entire grid goes down, you're talking years, literally years just to get things started again, because it's so old and outdated. Back in 2006, there was a blackout when I was back in Michigan, right, where we lost power. And it was just the East Coast and the Midwest, and it took 3 days for them to get power back to us. And that was the summertime, when it wasn't cold, when it wasn't ice on power lines or anything like that. So imagine what happens when somebody attacks our infrastructure and they take out a couple of key facilities that are directly connected to our electrical grid. That puts us in a position where we're gonna be sick and struggling. And the ones that's gonna be the worst off are the ones in the major inner cities, the ones that go shopping every 2 to 3 days for their food. Because if you don't have the supplies you need, you're gonna be in a hard position at that point in time when you can't go to the grocery store to get the necessary things you need. So you wanna prepare. You always want to make sure you have food at least for a couple of weeks. So can we go ahead and move to the next one? I did put, go ahead and move to the next one. I put, what about the stars? What about the stars? What about the stars? Asteroid 2007 FT3 was an asteroid that was identified about 16 years ago. Supposedly it disappeared. They don't know where it's at. But they know when it could hit, it could possibly graze our surface at this point in time. And see, that's what I talk about. It's a lot of smoke and mirrors and distraction, because you'd say, you know the date this asteroid could graze our atmosphere, but you don't know where it is. It's a 54 million ton asteroid that could be on a collision course with Earth. NASA is not sure where it is. Now, another article, the NASA Center for Study of Near-Earth Impact, has spotted an unprecedented number of asteroids in the vicinity that could hit at any time. Now, that part is nothing new in the sense that there's always asteroids out there flying, and there are always asteroids that can hit the Earth, but most of the smaller ones burned up coming through the atmosphere, right? But they're saying in this article that there was an unprecedented number of asteroids in the vicinity. One in particular is slated to possibly impact the Earth on October 5th, 2024. Is this the mystery asteroid? That is the question. 6 months after the total eclipse. Now, I put that there, 6 months after the total eclipse. We can go ahead and move to the next slide. Thank you. 6 months after this total eclipse, that's going to happen. And I don't have that eclipse slide in here. I'm sorry. I'll put it in the chat later on. There's an eclipse coming up on April 9th, where this the eclipse is going to start in Mexico and go straight across the United States through Texas, through the Midwest, cross south through the East Coast and Maine, and then into Canada, right? Well, the one on April 9th that comes through this way, through Texas, going to the East Coast, crisscrosses with another thank you. Crisscrosses with another eclipse that happened 7 years ago to the date of April 9th almost. But literally 7 years before that, this was the one that's happening in April 9th. The one that happened before that comes across like this. So they literally make an X straight across the United States, and it's kind of crazy. But the eclipse we had last year that was almost an 80% full, they consider partial, that eclipse made an X too. So you had two different eclipses that cause what can be an X once this final eclipse April 9th goes through. To me, that's a warning. When it says you see signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, the same year that the X is completed, the two X's will be completed by this one eclipse. The same year that happens, you've got this giant asteroid that nobody knows about, right? And then you've got the Devil's Comet. That's another comet that they've been talking about, and a lot of people know about it. It passes by Earth on the regular, and every 70 years it comes pretty close. In fact, I thought that was kind of cool when I saw that 70 years. I was like, that's kind of interesting here. But yeah, it's slated to pass the Earth this year. Now, normally, you can't see this comet with the naked eye. You would need a telescope. They call this comet the Devil's Comet because of the explosive gases on the comet that has given it a tail that is very interesting. The tail actually comes out in 2 points, like devil's horns. So when you look at it, you see this giant ball with devil's horns on it, and it's speeding in our direction, right? Kind of crazy. They literally nicknamed this thing the Devil's Comet. So if you Google it, you'll find the Devil's Comet. Pons Brooks P12, I believe is the name of the actual name of this particular comet. Now, you can't see this comet, like I said, with a normal eye, unless something were to happen, like an eclipse. But wait a minute. There's an eclipse this year. And interestingly enough, the eclipse that we're going to have on April 9th is happening around the exact same time Pons P. Brooks is passing by our atmosphere. So because of the eclipse, we may actually be able to see this asteroid. See this comet.